Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the Preach with Peach podcast. Today, I've got a very special guest with me. His name is Benjamin George. He's the former unemployed guru of Twitter. He's switched off now. He's moved on to working at a Fortune 500 company and then moving on to a different kind of venture, which we'll talk about later at the Selfmastered project as well. But Benjamin is actually one of my oldest connections on Twitter. We both came up around the same time, the class of 2018, as he called it before the podcast. And I'm really excited to actually speak to Benjamin because despite knowing him for a long time, this is the first time I've been able to connect with him in person. So I'm very excited to have him here. And yeah, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Same things, like we've spoken for so long through the DMs. It's the first time we see each other face to face. So great to see you.
Yeah, it should be fun. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. It's that's one of the fun things about podcasting from a personal view. It's a good chance to finally connect with some of the people that I've known for a while and new people as well in the future, I'm sure. So cool.
Yeah,
so
it's the perfect excuse. It's the perfect excuse to meet people.
It benefits everyone. It's win-win-win. So it's good. 2 + 2 = 6 in this scenario, I think. So it's good. Cool. So I mentioned before, like, in my little introduction, once upon a time, you were kind of framing yourself as the unemployed guru. And one of the things that's interesting about your whole, persona on Twitter is that I would say from my perspective, you've developed a very self-aware persona. That's like very much been at the heart of your presentation on Twitter. Is like you're trying to sometimes fight against like trends that are on there, trying to be a bit self-aware, bring a bit of balance to the timeline, I would say, compared to the more extreme takes that are kind of, the medium kind of brings about. So and one of the interesting things about this is you've also used your Twitter actually to leverage from going from unemployed to, working at a Fortune 500 company. Your Twitter was a big part of that. So this is very unusual kind of usage of the leverage of an audience. So I'm really interested to hear like how did that go? How did you do that? What was the thought process behind that? And also for people listening at home, how they can use kind of these tools that we have access in an unorthodox way.
Okay, yeah, sure. So it all really starts from the day I started my Twitter account, to be honest, because when I started, I was a final year university student. I had spent basically, it was basically my 7th year at university. So I was too long at university just to get my bachelor's degree. And I was studying 2 bachelors, right? One was business administration and the other one was like finance and accounting. So I was basically 23 going on 24. And I was like, okay, it's my final year at university. I'm not going to do a master's degree because I've spent long enough already. I also saw, because I come from a small town in Spain, from the south of Spain, where unemployment is just really, really high. So really, I just started the Twitter account with the goal of increasing my employment opportunities, really. I kind of like saw that the usual track that people were following there in my region was really just like you finish university, then you finish your master's, and then basically you either fuck off, go somewhere else, or you study oposiciones, which is kind of like government exams to work for the administration, for the government. And it's literally like you spend 3 years studying for them and you have no guarantee that you'll get into it. So I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I had a lot of ambition. I knew how to speak English in an area where nobody spoke English, which was a really good advantage and everything. And I was like, look, like there sure has to be a shorter way, or, there surely has to be something that I can do to escape this kind of like fate, because I just saw that everyone who people almost 30, they were still doing unpaid internships where I live, and it's like, well, I eventually want to have a family, and eventually want to have a wife, eventually want to have, like the usual house, car, all of that kind of things. So yeah, I started the account and I was like, okay, I think I'm quite smart. Everybody does, of course. And say, okay, I think I'm quite smart, but I don't want to fool anyone into thinking that I know what I'm talking about. So it kind of, because I'm still at university, so I was very like influenced by Taleb that summer of 2018. I was very influenced by him and by Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. And basically the whole idea of stop talking and start doing, which is almost like a platitude now on Twitter, but it really like something like that's why I started my Twitter, my blog, my newsletter, everything, because I was like, okay, I think I'm smart, but I've got nothing to show for it.
Mhm.
Let's go and do shit. And yeah, I just didn't want, I just wanted to avoid being a fraud in a way. I had like this imposter syndrome going on. So I just wanted to make it very clear that if you liked what I was talking about, you knew that I was a student or unemployed, or, you know, just maybe a smart kid who's said a few smart things, but it's not coming from experience. So one thing led to another, and I'm here.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's in contrast to a lot of, you know, like other people who do. I do think there are people presenting themselves as things they're not on Twitter, unfortunately, and I do think you can kind of see through that with a bit of discernment. And I think it's good that you kind of almost acknowledge that and try to, you know, kind of nip it in the bud and actually create. Like, I like it because you owned it, right? You just totally owned it. There was no kind of, you know, no, it wasn't like a false modesty thing. It was like, you know, this is who I am. Let's make it into, you know, let's make it into something fun, right? And that's a big part of your brand as well. I think is good. It's very, very, very fun thing. So one of the things I'm interested in is actually, like, you obviously went into Twitter with the express goal of using it, you know, to get a job, which I think is an unusual use of Twitter. I don't think many people even have that thought process, which is, you know, it shows you that Benjamin's an unorthodox thinker and a good thinker. So how did that actually go about? Like, how did you go about that? How did you manage to leverage it? What did the process actually look like?
Okay, so the goal for me to get a job was that I still had a lot of self-limiting beliefs of the possibilities of the internet. And it's something that I only notice now in retrospect. Is back then I just couldn't believe that you could, like, I don't know, out of nowhere, you know, which people have done really well, you know, out of nowhere, just say, hey, I have a knowledge, I can productize it, I can sell it as a service. I just had really self-limiting beliefs just because of the area I grew up with you know, like Spain has had over 50% youth unemployment for like a decade, you know, so it's like, it's really the environment that I've grown up in. I had like really self-limiting beliefs. So my goal was to get a job because that's the only thing that I had in mind from the realm of possibilities. And how I did it really is that because I wanted to skip the phase of studying a master's degree, because I wanted to skip the phase of just studying any longer, I was like, okay, so I need to build some skills, you know, because I saw a lot of people. The reason I joined like the area of Twitter that we are in is because I saw a lot of people doing it. So I was like motivated. It's like, well, if others can, I can too. I was like, okay, well, what can I teach? And I said, well, I can't teach copywriting because I don't know copywriting. Drop shipping was quite big back then. I said, well, I have no idea about drop shipping. So I was like, well, what skills should I focus on? And so I didn't really have a clear picture. So I was like, okay, I'm going to learn writing. So how do I learn writing? I said, I'll start a newsletter, a blog, a Twitter, and then just like kind of like learn how to do like online marketing really was what I was enjoying. So yeah, I started with Garrett. Well, I mean, Garrett had already started Ion Media, but I joined quite early on. Really helped Ion Media like grow, started a lot of newsletters, doing podcasts, making videos, and just really pursuing different my entrepreneurial spirit. And the way I leveraged it to get a few jobs actually was straight. Okay, so I got two internships because of it, because, you know, I needed, for me, the idea was have something on the CV, because my idea is, okay, I finished university, and in my resume, university is just one line. I said, what else do I have to show for it? So, okay, if I don't have a job because unemployment is quite big, so I'll create it myself. So, okay, well, you know, I've started podcasts, I've started newsletters. Let's say, okay, we both have the same degree. You have a better result than I do because I've got like the bare minimum basically. But when I say I'm entrepreneurial, or when I say I'm ambitious or I'm curious, I have the projects to show. I have like a portfolio of projects. So this kind of like, I leveraged it to get a really good internship, one of the best internships I could get in my region, which then I leveraged to get an internship for one of our friends who lives in New York. I also had an internship with him. Then after that, I leveraged the internships to get a job at a bank. And after that, with a job in the bank as a bank teller. And with all the combination of that, I managed to get a job at Microsoft. I guess also there is a place of being at the right moment at the right time. And I will admit that knowing English, the way I speak English in Spain is a very, very good advantage for me. So I'm not going to go and pretend, hey, yes, I got the job at Microsoft exclusively because of my online projects. No, knowing English was a very important part of it. Being in the right place was also a good part of it. But everything was leveraged together. I just, used everything to my advantage that I could, and I got the job.
Yeah, it's obviously it's always a multitude of factors, right? But it's super cool that, yeah, you had that kind of attitude towards it. And as well, it's the framing of it, right? This is a pursuit of projects. Like even for me, right? Obviously I've done something similar and like a slightly different way of doing it, but I'd never even think about like using it as something outside of the internet. Like I have this kind of dichotomy where I see the internet and my real life as being somewhat connected, but I try and keep these two things very separate, right? Like I've always kept my private life off of Twitter, basically until recently when I, released a thread about my son, which was, there was a very specific reasoning why I decided to do that based on my own kind of the way that I wanted to view it and the way that I wanted to, like, basically I've always kept my private life off the internet because my private life is pretty good. And I don't feel the need to kind of like project an image like, oh, how great my life is. It's just like, I have a pretty good life. I'm pretty well settled in, my I'm married. I have a family. My job was, okay. I'm happy with where my life is. And I didn't want to just put it on Twitter, like, like put all these pictures of me and my wife, like, look how happy we are, like all this stuff. I don't feel the need to do that. Right. And I also think it's important to, when you are public facing, to maintain some element of privacy. I think we're too willing to give up that privacy in this kind of like, as the online and the offline are continually blurring. But I wouldn't even think like of my job, right? No one knew I had like a Twitter account and was writing a newsletter or building a business until I literally quit my job. I literally told them one day and I was like, okay, I'm quitting. They're like, why? I was like, oh, because like I'm just earning more money now online. I don't need to work here anymore. So and I could go onto my wife's visa at that point. So I didn't need them for the visa anymore. So I think it's really cool that you kind of realize that this is something that is valuable in the real world, right? Even though there is this kind of separation. And I think that's something that'll be an interesting topic to explore, because I know you have talked a lot about things like memetics, a lot about kind of like this blurring between the online and offline. And I'm interested just to hear your thoughts on that and what your kind of take is on the way the world's going. There's a lot of talk of the metaverse and things like that as well.
Okay, I'll start first with what you mentioned with like combining like the offline and the online. It's like, I don't like to call it the real world anymore, just because like, there's just so much between the offline and the online. We already are living in the metaverse. Okay. But yeah, like the thing was, is that one thing that I was seeing when I joined Twitter was that really the way to actually become like a Twitter personality, or say like a personal brand, there was basically, you either, like, the way to do it successfully, I just saw like majorly two camps. One, you were already successful offline and you bring that expertise online. Like, think of someone like Naval, think of someone like Taleb, think of someone, like kind of person who has done something offline. And then the other camp that I saw, which is the one that I went through, is that you know, due to age, due to experience, whatever, you don't really have that legitimacy, that authority offline. So rather than play the authority or the legitimacy game, you play the learning in public game, which is something that David Perel has said many times, and which is something that I've really resonated with, because it's how I've done my journey. And then the people who were in between are the ones that would get exposed as frauds, would get exposed for creative writing, and let's leave it at that, because it's like, if you don't have the experience and you're trying to play, or the legitimacy, and you try to play the authority game, sooner or later, it's just, it's just you're faking it till you're making it, although you're not going to make it. So that's the reason why I went that route. And then why I decided to use it online is because, well, sure, I have experience on many things offline, but the ones that I don't have experience in are the ones that I want to learn online. And then I was thinking, okay, I was 23, 24 at the time. I'm 27 now. It's like, well, there's a lot of elements that I can build online and leverage offline. And then obviously there's a lot of elements offline that I can build and leverage online. So why separate them when I can use them both to my advantage? I used to play chess when I was younger. Okay. So it was always a bit like, well, I'm going to use, and, you know, never lie, but always leverage the information asymmetry of what I build here and say, hey, I'm trying to prove offline that I'm different because I'm doing all of this online. And then I'm trying to prove online that I'm different because then I'm also building a life and building something offline. So yeah, that was basically my goal. I will say though that the reason why I never went to full online business was because I wasn't good at it. You know, I wasn't just sufficiently trained, you know, didn't really practice it enough. You know, it's like reason why I didn't start, you know, making millions on Twitter, which people do, or, you know, a lot of money, or, you know, some people do, is not because you can't do it. It's just because maybe I wasn't good enough, or maybe I didn't try enough, you know. That's really it. So yeah, I just combined the two because I don't know, I like it.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction as well, because I think there was a period where, and people still think this, they think like online business is like an easy thing, right? It's like it's so easy to make money online, and like my experience has been the opposite. Now I'm doing all right, like I'm you know, I have been able to quit my job. I do live in Asia, right? So the threshold is lower, but I would be doing fine in England, let's put it that way. But it's like that was really hard. Like I had to get help. I had to pay someone to help me. I got a coach to help me monetize and build an offer, because I tried it on my own and I couldn't do it. And I think there is a kind of this impression that it is somehow like easy, and that anyone can start a Twitter account and become, you know, get 100,000 followers and be able to be earning, you know, 50K a month. And like, it's just, you know, it's just a matter of consistency. It's not. I actually do believe that the internet is the ultimate meritocracy in that sense, that it is very much like, yes, anyone can do it. The actual resources you need to do it are very low. Like you can do it with a phone and an internet connection. You don't need anything else. A laptop will probably help, but you don't actually need anything else. But that doesn't mean, just because the investment is low doesn't mean that anyone can do it. It's a very highly skilled thing. And there's been a lot of people who have come and gone in the, you know, the 4 years that 3 or 4 years, whatever, that we've been there. And, you know, I've nowhere near built like a huge audience. I've got an all right audience, but that has been difficult enough as it is. You know, even just like getting the audience on its own is hard enough, let alone being able to then, you know, monetize it and scale it out. So I think it's yeah, obviously you kind of came to that conclusion by the sounds of it, that did you try and monetize at some time? Was there a point where you were like, I want to make this into a business? Or were you always, because you obviously in the initial stage, you always had an eye to get using it to leverage a job in terms of your strategy, but what did you want to monetize it, or did you want to create a business?
I think at the beginning then I kind of got disillusioned just because I just didn't have the skill, I guess. You know, I'm not, because I don't know, I have no problems in admitting it. I just wasn't good at it, you know, because as I said, I just didn't have the confidence to, I don't know, I just didn't really feel that I had any kind of legitimacy or any kind of authority to be teaching anyone anything. I just didn't want it. I didn't want the response. I just thought, you know, at that moment in time, it was best for me to get a job and leverage and try to get a better job and kind of like build both at the same time. I am monetizing it now, but more in a sales point of view, you know, in the DMs, really more like talking to people, taking them on sales calls, you know, and closing and all of that. But like from the actual perspective of building a product, and I mean, it's always has been like a goal of mine to build a product. It's just, I've never really reached that point where I felt confident enough on a specific topic, and not only confident enough, but that I would care enough for a while to actually have some coherence. I'm just lazy in that aspect. And, you know, it's just, there wasn't anything that I said is what I could, you know, because my idea to monetize something is like, okay, at least spend a year with it, in the form of, okay, you make a course, but you have to be, you know, at least a year on brand to continue selling it and all of that. And it's like, there was just nothing that I thought of, hey, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and part of that's kind of this is a good segue actually, because part of that's knowing yourself, right? Like knowing where your skills lie, knowing where you are, and being, again, as I said at the beginning, I do think you have a very self-aware brand. So it's again, it kind of fits into that theme. And then what you're doing now is you've started a new project, which I don't know, or you're working with a new project, which I'll be honest, I don't know a huge amount about. I've seen you obviously advertising it. And the interesting thing about that is that the name is Selfmastered, right? And this idea of you knowing yourself, knowing your limitations, and deciding at that point maybe you weren't ready, it was time to go in a different avenue. And now you've kind of circled back in some way to, with the experience, with the more knowledge, you know, you're older, you've worked in a, you know, you got a bit of legitimacy there with, you know, the name working for Microsoft. It does, you know, it is impressive, right? It's like working for Google or working for, you know, a big bank or something. It holds weight, right? So yeah, I'm curious about that project. Essentially, I'm curious about Selfmastered. What is it like? I believe it's started by Leon Castillo, right? Am I saying his name right?
Yes.
Is that my Spanish accent? Probably not so good, but
yeah. So Leon, it's basically Leon's project, and I've joined with the goal to help him scale it. That's basically it. So it starts, long story short, it's training for entrepreneurs, even though we do have professionals, of course, but it's basically, we train entrepreneurs in peak performance, because most people's business problems are actually self-management problems that reflect in business. So the thesis is, you know, in this day and age, especially now with, you know, working from home, the pandemics and the lockdowns, is that people are burnt out, people are stressed, people don't know how to set goals, people aren't focusing. And that's basically what gives a thesis, that if you're able to perform at your best day in and day out, you will achieve anything that you set out to. And that's basically it. I can go deeper into it if you want, but that's kind of like the summary. And I've joined after, I left Microsoft to join this, and helping Leon build it, scale it. And we have our goal to IPO in 2029, and that's our goal.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. And yeah, I can absolutely relate to this, right? So I quit my job in, I think, May last year. And since then I've been working, you know, for myself full time. And I also had a kid in that time, obviously, as well. So time management and being able to apply the, create routines, create systems that work for me, work for my family, that mean I can continue to work with my business, because I set my own structure, right, for the day.
Yes.
Like I'm no longer following a company structure where I have to be there at this time, work for these hours, go home. And in many ways, that's very, very freeing. But like all elements of freedom, that comes with second order effects, consequences. And I have to be very self-motivated to do my work, because if I don't do it myself, if I don't create these systems, create these structures, which make it easy for me to work, it doesn't get done and I don't get paid. Exactly. So it's very, very important. And that has been probably one of the hardest things of transitioning, actually. At least one of them. There's a few other things. I do actually miss some elements of an office environment as well, meeting people on a day-to-day. In general, I don't. But if I went to like an office once a week, that'd be all right. But like every day is a bit too much, I'll be honest, for my character. But like it is quite tough. So what are some of the things that you guys, you know, what are the areas what do you focus? Obviously, don't give any trade secrets away, but like, how does it work?
So basically, so the premise is productivity doesn't work. You should focus on performance instead, because productivity really follows a reductionist point of view, in that you have a system and you go to each part individually. But because only working on the parts individually without realizing how it's all connected, if you don't do that, and if you don't realize how they're all connected, it's not going to work. It's going to be placebo. Best example is, if you're going through a divorce, is your new productivity calendar really going to be working for you? Well, not really, because you're going through a fucking divorce. If you're in poor health, you don't really sleep much, you have a poor diet, and you don't hit the gym, no matter how many great goals you have, you're physically not capable of sitting down and focusing for 2 or 3 hours. So this is just like the problem. And the way we tackle it is, and the way it's all based on science and experience. It's basically as you have to basically train everything. So don't focus on productivity, focus on your overall performance. And if you work on your overall performance, productivity is a byproduct. And when we say, okay, well, how do we work on your overall performance? So it's like, sure, people have this idea of being productive, of performing at a high level for their jobs, but then might not touch the other areas. And you have to basically touch everything. You have to touch touch, I'm translating from Spanish, okay? You have to like cultivate and train all areas. So like, not only do you have to work on your business and your professional goals, but you have to have relationship goals. You actually have health goals, self-development goals, and all of them have to be intertwined, because if your relationship is shit, your focus is going to be, it's going to take a hit. If your health is shit, maybe you can't execute on the goals, and they're all related. And then you've got to learn goals to have everything work, for your business goals, relationship goals, and social life goals. Then you also have to maybe know how to, design your environment for less distraction. So basically, what we teach are 8 skills. If you work on these 8 skills, your personal performance is going to go up. Your business or professional goals are going to be achieved. As simple as. And yeah, there's no secrets. Like basically what we teach is goal setting, awareness to know where you are. Then awareness to where you are, because most people really have no idea what their performance is. Best example is the day you start tracking calories. It's the day you realize you were eating 1,000 calories above your maintenance, and that's why you're getting fat. But you wouldn't know until you don't track your calories. Well, the same, but for your personal performance. Then how to set goals, how to execute, how to optimize with feedback, and then how to focus, emotional management, stress, spiritual performance, and energy management. Really, energy, physical energy, no woo-woo bullshit, energy vibrations in the universe. And that's what we teach for entrepreneurs. And yes, once they really go through all the observed, like the bottlenecks that they have, it's just really fixing it, and their performance skyrockets, to be honest. And it's reflected in it's reflected in revenue, in more clients, in more growth, being able to add more people, just because they're able to work more in less time, and then not have to be working weekends, not have to work overtime, not have to, sacrifice their work-life balance and everything.
Yeah, it's something that I can relate to as well, again, because both in my personal life and also in my work life, because obviously what I do is I coach people through their relationships, either when they're single to help meet a good woman to hopefully enter into a relationship, or actually within their relationships as well. And one of the things that's really common for my clients is once they start working with me is they'll often get a pay rise, or they'll get a promotion, or they'll start to actually improve in other areas of their life, because for these people who I tend to work with, their bottleneck is normally their relationships. That's why they're working with me. Right. So when they start actually getting these things fixed, and there's some elements of social skills which help with that as well, because obviously how you relate to with women is essentially social skills. So with a twist and a specific focus normally. But once you start improving these areas, suddenly you get a pay rise, right? Suddenly your boss likes you more because you're more sociable in one aspect, or you're feeling better about your relationships, and suddenly like you say, your performance picks up. You get into a relationship, and maybe for a couple of weeks it goes down because your time's restricted. But then once you get that leveled out and you kind of set in these new routines as you go through that transition period, which I'm so sure is part of what you guys talk about as well, I'd imagine. Like when you have these transitions, it's figuring out new systems, right? Then they tend to improve a lot. So and I can see it in myself as well. When my son was born, before that I'd already quit my job, and everything was going well. And then when he was born, we found out his condition, and going to hospital very regularly, like 3 or 4 times a week. That was the time when it's very difficult to maintain my business, because it was finding not just time but also the motivation to do so. But once you kind of get things a bit settled in, things go better, things go smoother, things start growing again rather than regressing or staying stagnant. So it sounds like it is a very universal model, right? It as you mentioned train everything. It is
yes,
is part of it making people into a Renaissance man as well? Is that part of it? I had a conversation with Fury and we were talking about the same concept of the Renaissance man and training everything. So it's interesting it's come up again in this conversation. So do you want to dig into a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. Like, I'll be honest, I'm aware of the Renaissance man, but I'm not fully aware of what exactly it means. So I'm just throwing that out there from the beginning. I will say though that yes, like at the end, what we teach works for everyone. It's just we market for entrepreneurs for marketing purposes, economics, and also because for two other reasons. One, because entrepreneurs usually have more discretionary time, meaning they have usually a bit more say in how they spend their time. So obviously, if you're a professional and you have 8 hours a day, a boss telling you what to do, it's just harder to maybe set goals and execute and focus and like do all the necessary changes because you maybe have that structure given by someone else. And that's why we go for entrepreneurs, but also just because at the end, we treat it all with a goal. It's like, it's one thing that people miss when, the usual, don't want to call it platitude, but the usual kind of tweet that always usually does well when it's systems thinking versus goals thinking, right? Say, don't do any goals thinking, focus on systems and that's it. But there's a problem, there's a second order effect to that now where people just love the systems for the sake of it. And it's like, well, I'm in love with achieving my goals. I set systems to get those goals, It's like at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's a vehicle that takes me somewhere.
Yeah.
So I like systems, but I don't want to be all mentally masturbating all the time and just living in this kind of like theoretical world of look at my note-taking system, look at my second brain on Notion, look at my, my, all of these, like my perfect calendar, which mixes this and that. It's like, okay, great. What are you doing with it? So So basically, we teach everything, we train everything, but with the goal of, hey, take your business to the next level by improving your performance. Because, once you become this, Renaissance man, like you say, you're able to then take your business to wherever you want to take it, really. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that as a difference because I think there is, if I understand the term Renaissance man correct, okay, like you can correct me afterwards if I'm wrong. It's nice because you build everything and it kind of like it feels nice, right? Because you're training everything, but we do that with a goal. That's basically what I wanted to say. Yeah.
The Renaissance man is normally a guy who's interested in anything. It's kind of the Leonardo da Vinci is the archetypical kind of Renaissance man. He's every area he's got an interest and wants to explore every avenue, doesn't limit himself. But it's your system should be derived from your goals, right? Like ultimately, like the goal informs the system. Like exactly. It's not either or. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing with, again, I'm going to bring it to my own work to relate it, but it's pickup artists and my own focus, which is to get guys into relationships rather than just sleep with women. We have different goals, right? We're both related to women. It's both to do with intersexual dynamics and how to be a man and how to behave as a man, etc., etc. But the goals are different. Therefore, the ways that you behave are different. Because if you want to have a meaningful, loving relationship, acting like a red pill pickup artist is not going to work. You've set the foundation all wrong. You might be able to get with a woman, you might be able to maintain a relationship for a couple of months, but you're never going to have a meaningful, loving marriage, like living like that. It's just not going to happen. Whereas the system that I run is very much okay. Like a pickup artist is probably going to get more of a higher close rate, as it were.
That's in sales.
He's going to get like with more women, right? If you work with a pickup artist, you may be like using their system, you'd be able to get with like, I don't know, 15 women in a year, right? Using that system. That's probably if you're very good, by the way. They don't sleep with as many people as they make out. But with my system, like those 15 people, probably none of those you'll get with. And you'll probably, over the course of 3 months, only have 2 or 3 meaningful connections. But of those 2 or 3 meaningful connections, there's probably like a 60-70% chance it's going to turn into something that's actually going to last. It might not last forever. I can't guarantee that. But like, you're going to have something that's actually going to mean something and going to give you the chance to get into a long-term committed relationship. Because the goal is different. the system to get there is different. And if you switch the systems, you're not going to achieve the goal.
Exactly.
Right. And a lot of people get mixed up in our space because they will. Something I heard from a guy that I've recently started following, I really like his stuff. I've forgotten his bloody name now. I think it's something O'Neill. Something O'Neill. I want to say Rob O'Neill, but I want to say, but he had this idea of only following one person in one area. So if you want to improve in your fitness, just follow one fitness account, like a guy you think you vibe with. He's got the kind of body you want. Follow his method of fitness. Don't follow like a guy telling you about keto and then a guy telling you about like, calorie counting, and then a guy, who's doing body weight workouts, and then a guy who's telling you how to do bodybuilding. They're all different systems and they all lead to slightly different goals. If you probably improve by doing that, but just listen to one and follow that system. Otherwise you're getting too much noise on the internet, especially on something like Twitter. Same with business. Follow one business plan with one guy who has a certain way of doing it. Follow that until you hit that point, and then maybe you can move on to someone else. Don't get like 5 different business coaches pulling you in 5 different directions. Same with your love life. If you have somebody who has the kind of relationship you want, follow that person, follow their system. If you want to sleep with 100 women, don't follow my advice. It's not gonna get you anywhere. It's just not. Maybe it'll probably help, but it's not going to be. It's not going to be as effective as if you follow, somebody who exclusively focuses on that, right? I think that was something that resonated with me recently. That I think, that's quite interesting. So I don't know if that's if you want to comment on that, if you have any thoughts on that kind of idea.
Yeah, no, it's very good advice. Like it's just. I mean, clarity is like in this day and age, we need people can't focus because of lack of clarity, really. It's like when you know what you need to work on, you focus. So, segue to what we do, right? But like, clarity is just really, really needed. There's exponential information, ever increasing complexity in the world. And our brains are not, evolutionary wise, biology wise, we're still hunter gatherers, our brains is the same brain. And, our environment has just changed so much, digital and, real, if you want to say. And you just need to simplify. That's one thing that I liked of Twitter, knowledge, kind of like the mental models, rules of thumb, heuristics, because they're very good. Most are shit, to be honest, but like there's very good when you create these quick rules for yourself, which really offload a lot of cognitive capital, offload a lot of thinking and stuff, just because, or else you can't devote your full attention to more than one thing at the same time, to be honest. So one system on each, do the 80-20s. And it was one of my favorite ones, mental models, because they're actually useful. It's like, say, okay, if I just follow this, I'm going to get 80% of the results and only 20% of the work, the effort doing it. All areas, exactly the same. Yeah. I fully agree.
Yeah. That's a rule I follow as well. I think it's a good one. And like, I totally agree. These heuristics, they are, heuristics, and these things that we're talking about on Twitter, even if we say it as a absolute, nothing's absolute. It's all a heuristic. It's something that is true, most of the time, but not all the time, and should help you out, right? I like the way you put it. It's like a cognitive saving. Saves your cognitive energy, right? I like that idea. Yeah. So I want to kind of transfer a little bit, and it's kind of on a similar line, but a little bit different. Is because we've kind of got this theme running through of talking about, the difference in the online and the offline, and how these two things are interchanging. Like in the world we're living in, it's, especially since COVID, right? It's becoming way more blended. I mean, we're communicating here like in literal like different continents, but we're here chatting through, and we only know each other in the online realm, right? Like we've never met physically. But like one of the things I want to talk about, especially because you have this kind of background in working with kind of online communities, both with Selfmastered and previously Ion, like how do you kind of visualize the difference between like online and offline tribes, or is there any? You seem to be these two. The world is already, you mentioned earlier, we're already living in the metaverse. So I'm just interested about this idea of like kind of tribes or communities and human interaction in the online versus offline kind of, wherever you want to go with that.
Okay, sure. For me, I think it's important. I mean, I have a very healthy tribes and communities in both. I mean, I did move countries recently, so maybe I've lost a bit of the offline, a little bit, but I mean, it's still there. And there's just pros and cons to both, basically. I'm of the thought of you can't fully have online friends because you don't get along well with nobody offline, because then there's probably something wrong with you. Like, I'm just going to throw it out there, because, I mean, it's just how it is. And then I think it's also, I mean, if you have a very good, strong community offline, you don't really need one online. So sure, I think it should take, I think if you had to choose between one, it should be the offline one. Because, if your house is on fire, your Twitter friends can't go there, whereas your neighbor can, and maybe save your dog. You know what I mean? It's a stupid example, but first thing that came to mind. It is true, though, that, for example, I joined the online world because maybe I had friends to party with. I've had friends that I've grown up with all my life, and different groups of friends, but maybe on an intellectual level, or maybe more of in a curiosity level, I just didn't have anybody offline who had maybe my similar, at least in certain aspects, similar interests. So then I found them online. So when it comes to tribes, online and offline, I think online tribes are great. Because for me, I've grown so much over the last few years on Twitter. I've made friends in 2018, 2019 that are still friends today online. It feels like 10-year friendship because you're reading their tweets every single day. You're reading every thought they think. You're reading, you're supporting them more than their friends are, that your friends are supporting you offline, because you're like liking their tweets, buying their stuff, going through their services, all of these things. So it's very, very powerful. And there is a sense where you can truly find people who are more close to you or more similar to you, just maybe not geographically, but in other areas, yes. So yeah, big fan. It's a shame that, I don't know, I've only met, like, literally this week I met a person from Twitter here in Tallinn in Estonia, and it's the third person I've met online. You know what I mean? So like, I have multiple friends for years on Twitter, and I haven't met any of them other than Leon. I haven't met, Niels, Fury that you spoke yesterday, all the Americans like Garrett and Rob, and haven't met them. So pros and cons to both. I think online friendships, online tribes are on the rise. They will continue to be, because there is just something about that whole finding people who think way more similar to you. People like to be with people who think similar, have similar interests. And it's just, the chances that you find someone like that offline are different. And there are some dangers to it, when you're just only surrounded by people who think like you. So that's why I say also, don't leave your offline. And if you have no friends offline, do something about it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's not a dichotomy, right? It's one of the things I am definitely, like, a little while ago, there was a big kind of brouhaha is probably not the right word actually, but there was a big kind of theme in our space of like, eventually we're going to form these online tribes that have met, online, are eventually going to converge, and it's going to become offline, right? People are going to move to areas of similar kind of location, like similar kind of, people are going to group up together, right? So you're going to get like people who think a certain way, and maybe they've already connected online, are eventually going to move this offline. They're all going to move to like one city or one town, or there's going to be some element of like, it's going to move to a more community centered kind of setting. And I don't see that talked about as much anymore as maybe 2 years ago. So I'm just curious about your kind of thoughts on that, because I think some people in our scene have kind of worked on things about that, right? Kind of community, creating communities and stuff. People, I know, for example, that, Deep Thrill, you mentioned, he's big on like trying to create kind of like new cities. It's kind of seems to be a thing that he talks about a lot.
Brit cult too, I think.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
So when this was more prevalent as an idea, like let's say 2 years ago, I agreed more with it back then than I do now, for the reason that there is an element uneasiness to online friendships in the form of
Yes.
you talk to people when you want to, and when you don't, you don't, you know. And it's very, I don't know, it's one of the downsides, I think, too. It's because it's really, you end up becoming too comfortable, you know, in a sense. Like, you don't interact with people with you don't want to, you just block them, which I'm a very big fan of, by the way. But like, you know, no, but I mean, it really starts really morphing the way you view relationships, I think. So to then go and say, we all live in like some, I don't know, some camp, like some were saying, you know, like, let's say we all move to an island. It's like, well, I don't know, I already read your tweets, I don't need anything, I don't need much more. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? It's like, I just don't agree. I don't see it as, I don't agree with it as much as I did back then, just because we're used to, we used to that, to really have it on demand. I think is the word I was looking for, was to have it on demand, and when we don't, you know. And yeah, I think it is true that, you know, there's a lot of people who will meet, you know, people who will marry from meeting online. There's a lot of friendships that will be, you know, will be made forever. I do believe that. I maybe people who, you know, like Leon and I, for example, we're working together now. We started as friends, you know, so like there's a lot of convergence of relationships that happen offline that then become like, you know, relationships online and stuff. But the idea of all living together, I don't think so. I just don't see it. Just because you would need to actually physically move is a very big change in life. You know, you move to Asia, I moved to the other corner of Europe, and you know, you move for the woman of your dreams, you move for the man of your dreams, you know, you move for the job of your dreams. But for your friends, I don't know. Maybe some do, okay, but I just don't see the gravitational pull there compared to the other two, maybe.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, by the way. Like, I think one of the things we forget about online relationships are very low investment.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to create them. It's very easy to connect with people, which obviously has advantages, and it's very easy to you know, to present a certain face online that maybe like in real life is going to be different. And you know, I've experienced this with people that I've connected with for a long time, and then when push comes to shove, or they say they're going to do something and they don't do it, and in my friendship circles, my real friendship circles, I don't tolerate that, right? We don't like the way that my friends work is we're very my old friends is like, you stick to your word, you know, like we have a bond that we've been through stuff together. And I think a real important thing that people forget about when in that period is that what really creates that tribal feeling is going through things together, which doesn't really happen offline. It's the physical going through experiences together, doing these things with your friends that, you know, nobody else has got. You've got these little you know, these hardships that you've done, or, you know, stupid stuff you did as kids growing up, you know, that's what really brings you together. And it's the same with the relationship. You know, with the person that you, as you say, the gravitational pull of the right woman, or if you're a woman, the right man is something that is worth doing it for. But again, it's that physical element to it. It's the experiences that you go through together that really, really bind you together. And until I do think there was an element of idealism at that time. And I do think though that as the world does become more, the internet becomes more important. People like to say Twitter isn't real life, but to some degree it is.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Like the narratives that are formed on Twitter become mainstream narratives 2 months later, or 2 weeks later, or a month later. That it informs real life. It's ahead of the curve, as it were, or the cutting edge of the curve. And where was I going with this? I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, but there is going to be, I do think, a kind of dichotomy where there is going to be this global network where we're not all going to move together, we're not all going to live together, just for practical reasons and for personal reasons. And like, you know, for example, I'm not going to move my wife and my son to go live with some guys I met on Twitter. Like, come on, who do you think? What do you think I am? Like, but like at the same time, there is going to be this global network, which I do think is going to be more and more influential, and there is a potential to create an elite, like a new elite that is kind of formed, but it's a global elite, if you know what I mean. Like you're in Eastern Europe, I'm in Asia. We've got many people in different parts of America, different parts of the world. And I do think that the potential for, as we mentioned earlier, the internet is very meritocratic. There is a potential that with the right connections, that there will be this kind of moneyed elite, which is kind of outside of the traditional roots of elite. And that could have some influence on society. I think that will, as we go forward, potentially, if these things, you can't predict the future, but I think that's an interesting idea, more so than the offline kind of, we've all got to go live in San Francisco or something. Yeah. Like, I don't know about that. So on that topic, we've both been people who have up sticks and moved. And I'm actually curious about one of the things you mentioned earlier about Spain. So I'm from Britain, I'm from Europe. People go to Spain on holiday, but in general, we don't know a lot about Spain or Spanish history. We're not taught about it. Like we know a lot about France, Germany, Italy, but Spain seems to be very rarely talked about. And I've just finished reading a book as I walked out one midsummer's morning, which is about 1930s, just before the Spanish Civil War. And it's about a British guy who basically went and kind of vagabonding in Spain. He spent 2 years vagabonding around Spain just before the Civil War broke out. And then he went back to Britain. And you mentioned, and there's all kinds of interesting stuff in there that I wasn't aware of at all about Spain. It's really fascinating. It's like this kind of almost time capsule, because it's an autobiography, this time capsule. And you mentioned that there's the youth unemployment rate is like 50% in Spain. Like, what does that look like in reality? Like how does that actually manifest? Like, because this has basically gone on since 2008, I'm guessing, in the recession. And but how does that actually look? Because that sounds, when you say that, like half of all people young people don't have a job. Like, what do their lives look like? What was it like growing up in that environment? I'm just curious.
You work in the fields or in drugs, practically. So okay. I'm going to use this topic just because it was very popular this week. Like that subreddit called anti-work, right? I don't know if you heard of it. Like,
I'm not aware of it.
Okay, well, basically,
Reddit, I'd stay away from Reddit.
Okay, good. Yeah, so basically, okay, I'll bring another topic then. How, these days and age, that what they've always said about millennials just love to live with their parents. Millennials just have kids way later and all of this stuff. Well, it's basically that. It's like people make fun of Spaniards for living with their parents into their 30s. Like, yeah, but if you're broke, if you have no money, if you have no job, what else can you do? You're just going to go out and live in the street? Well, no. So that's how it looks like. Basically, it's people just have no dreams. And those who do leave, they leave to Germany, they leave to other parts of Spain, because I'm from the south of Spain where there's less work. There's jobs in Madrid and Barcelona, the capitals, but pretty much that's it. And jobs, when I mean jobs, I mean like decent jobs, high paying jobs, a job that you can live off. Yeah. Of course, if you want to work for Burger King, you can work in any town. You know what I mean? Like, and no disrespect to Burger King, okay? But like, yeah, it's a sad situation. Basically, any engineer, they're all in Germany. All businessmen, like, they're all in Madrid or Barcelona or London or Paris or wherever. Like, all my friends that I grew up with, none of them live in the area that I live. I was the last one to move, basically. They all moved to either the islands for tourism, to work in tourism, or they go to Barcelona, Madrid, or they leave to England. Like, a few of them went to Reading, for example. And that's it, really. And those who stay work in the fields picking strawberries. They're in prison because they've been working in drugs smuggling, basically, because there's a lot of, obviously, because of the closeness with the African continent, we're a really important gateway to Europe for drugs. So there's a lot of people in prison who I grew up with, basically, because obviously if you have a career, you don't get into drug smuggling, or it's not as attractive to you. But if you're making 500 euros a month and living with your parents, it's like, well, got nothing to lose. So yeah, Spain, there's a lot I could talk about Spain, to be honest. I think also we've got many great things, but just some things just don't work. So it's one of the reasons I moved to Estonia too. Like, It's like Estonians ask me, it's like, why the fuck are you here? Why? It's like, because here it's like the weather's miserable here. At least during the winter, it's just absolutely miserable. And they're like, well, why are you here? It's like, why not sunny Spain? It's like, because they all go to the Canary Islands, basically. And I was like, yeah, but like, I just feel like a man here. I feel more like an adult, because like the ease of business is just way different. Like I came here with my job from Microsoft. I resigned when they said I had to go back home to Spain. And there was just no doubt in my mind that I was going to find a job either via Twitter or around here. And 3 days after giving my notice, I had a job. So like, I literally haven't been unemployed, not a single day throughout the whole pandemic. In Spain, maybe I wouldn't have resigned, because I would be completely in a really like scarcity mindset of, because there's a lot of, woo-woo bullshit, manifestation nonsense. I mean, manifestation in some cases does work, okay? But like, there's a lot on Twitter. It's like, oh, just have an abundance mindset. So yeah, it's depends on context. When you grow up where I grew up, maybe I'm just coping, okay? But where you grow up where I grow up, it's just, you don't see any abundance. The person who's living well is because they're involved in politics, or because they're someone's son or someone's daughter, and they put them there. Basically. So yeah, so I don't know where you want me to go with this, but basically how Spain looks like, how youth unemployment looks like, not good. And I don't think it's only Spain though, although that we got it probably the worst, coupled with Greece, Portugal and Italy in Europe. But here in Estonia, I mean, no, here in Estonia it's a bit different, but like, it's just, they say people in Manhattan working for Wall Street are living paycheck to paycheck. Well, it's the same thing in Spain. Nobody's forming families, nobody's moving out of the parents' house, nobody's working.
I mean, on the abundance manifestation stuff, is there's some truth to it, and there is a lot of truth to it actually. Like you have to get the mindset right, like otherwise you're gonna, because it's kind of goes back to systems, right? Like the mindset's almost like the system. Like one thing I had to change about, like, for example, when I just to apply this in my business, like I paid quite a lot of money to work with a coach at one point, and my scarcity mindset would have been like, I don't want to pay this money, because like I live in Asia, I was living on an Asian wage, like, and I paid like quite a lot of money for this, and it was a significant amount of money. And the scarcity mindset is actually, I need to save that money, like it's not worth taking the risk. Whereas the abundance mindset is like, I believe that I can make this work, right? So but just believing I can make it work is not enough.
Exactly.
you still have to
put the work.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
That's why I mentioned sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, carry on.
No, so it's that's why I said, okay, I retracted a bit and say, okay, it does work under conditions, because there is a science to it actually. Basically, if you visualize it, the neurons in your brain are kind of firing together in a way. So, but you have to use it in the right way. Basically, if you can't manifest or visualize becoming a millionaire, making $1 million, because that's, we all dream. But if you manifest as in exactly what you just said, I trust that I can make this happen because I have a plan and I can put it to work, that's way different, because you're kind of like, I don't know, hypnotizing yourself to get it, and you're getting the ball going in the right way. And then the same with visualizations. Like if you visualize the process, like athletes do it a lot and it works for them. Because like if you visualize, say you're basketball player, and you visualize the routine that you have to do the free throw, it works because you're also practicing it physically, but then also like rehearsing it in your mind. So it does work. But there's a difference between that and, yes, I'm going to become a millionaire just because I'm great, because I deserve it, because I'm alpha male. That's a lot of nonsense that just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's the classic, like, this is easy, right? It's like it's the way to make you feel like you're doing something without actually doing anything, isn't it? Yeah, it's and on that line of visualization, I always remember reading an interview with Harry Kane. I know you're a football fan as well, where he was big into visualization. He would visualize himself scoring goals every week, because it's like, and the way that I can't remember if this is what they said, but the way I interpreted it is like, when I'm then in that position, it's like I've been there 100 times more than I have. Like maybe in a one match, you'll get, if you're a good player, you'll get 3 very good goal scoring opportunities. That's all. Like, and the fact that if you get 3 of those in a match as a top striker, that's already very good, by the way. But if you've then you've been there in your mind another 20
Yeah.
times, you feel more calm in that situation. I've done this before, kind of thing. That's how, at least how I thought about it. Yeah, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about the thing you mentioned about Estonia and the ease of doing business as well, because do you mean that in terms of like actual like business opportunities, or do you mean that just in terms of just like day-to-day living, like
both actually?
Yeah, because
both. Yeah, so I'd like to mention it because I mean, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. You're the guest, so.
Okay, no. So basically, okay, so everyone thinks that I moved to Estonia to evade taxes for some reason. It's like, I've been LARPing as unemployed for 2 years, and now you think I've made enough money to evade taxes? Like, come on. But yeah, so the thing with Estonia is many things, at least compared to Spain, okay, it's because it's both my experiences, many things just work. Like, I actually pay more taxes here than in Spain. I pay 30% taxes here. Whereas in Spain, I paid like between 12 and 15, which is higher than what most people pay in Spain, actually. So I'm above average in Spain because nobody in Spain makes enough to pay taxes. But I'll leave that for another day. And when it comes to like I set up the business myself. Like I have like I think it's the equivalent of an LLC here. I set it up all myself, few clicks, translating from Estonian to English, everything. I had plenty of resources in English, set up my business. Next day, I could completely operate with it. I don't have to pay any monthly fee. In Spain, I would have to pay if I'm doing as a freelancer kind of setup, I would be paying like a flat rate of 300 euros a month, no matter if I make money, if I lose money, I got to pay it. And but when you do the equivalent of an LLC in Spain, I don't think you pay a monthly thing, but they kind of like get cost in another way. And it's just, things just work. You can spend most of your time actually working and not having to be on administrative nonsense, not having to be on legislation bullshit, not having to be, you have ease of just doing many things. It's hard for me to explain because I don't think most people have the experience of what it is to do business in Spain. But basically, you just get like no administrative process works in Spain. You have to go in person. Here you can do everything online. You can even vote online here. And I voted already. Like, you know, you just have your digital ID and you could just do everything. I set up a bank account online. I don't have to go anywhere to any if I don't want to. I do sometimes just to get out of the house to, like, you know, whatever. But like, you spend most of your time actually working on the things that add value, and the things that, sure, you have to get done with, but don't add value, they're just very easy. Whereas in Spain, most of your time you'll be, or at least a very large amount of time, you'll be focusing on administrative aspects, legal aspects, tax aspects, just bullshit aspects. Have to go in person 50 kilometers to the town, to another city to get something done because you can't do it online. Waste a whole morning. That's on one aspect. And then when it comes to like opportunities, I think also I'm biased because, you know, I lived in a small town in Spain and here I'm living in the capital. And I don't know, I get the sense that there's more opportunities. It is true though, that maybe for specific people with a specific profile, mostly IT, because then you can do like, you can work for international businesses. Everybody else here works for like Bolt, which is like kind of like the Uber, Estonian Uber. And, you know, so there is a bit of inequality here. You know, the Estonians just really know how to market themselves well. But yeah, it's just here, I don't know, there's just more jobs, there's more easiness, just things just click. It's hard for me to describe, but the feeling is that things just click here and you can just spend most of your time working on things that add value. That's how I would summarize it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, again, that I resonate with living in Asia versus living in the UK. In the UK, there's so many hoops that you have to jump through to do something that should be very simple. It's like, whereas, you know, living in Asia, like here, you know, I'm in Thailand, you can't do business unless you're Thai, but we'll be moving to Indonesia soon. And in Indonesia, you can have your business running before you have to register it. So it only has to be registered when it's earning over X amount. And until that point, you can just operate with no problem. Like, you know, until you're earning X amount, and then, okay, at this point you need to register it and check you're coming in. People can just set up a little shop outside their house. There's no laws, there's no zoning restrictions, there's no, you can't do this because it's going to be a, you know, inconsiderate to your neighbors, because people are just considerate to their neighbors because they live next to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't need to tell them, like you don't have to make a law to stop them from doing it. And if they do something that gets it frustrating, there's social pressure, and you can get, you know, people involved. And there's also, even though it's not a democracy, there is every little village has like a little democratic kind of leader. They have like a leader, and then the leader, if there comes into these kind of disputes, it doesn't go any further than him. They just sort it out. The village sorts it out, kind of thing. And it's just far easier and a far better way of living. You know, like I don't have to. It's not sewn up that only big businesses can operate, because that's how I feel about how it is in Europe. It's very much the systems, the laws, the amount of capital you have to invest to have any kind of like brick and mortar business makes it very exclusionary. And it means that there's just a dominance of a few chains, a few big businesses, and then a few people who spot a niche or have got a bit of capital. And it's not like you can't do it. It's just prohibitively difficult that most people can't. Right? Most people don't, unless they have a trade or something, and then then it's a bit different. But yeah, it's that's one of the things that really appeals to me living in Asia and staying here long term, because especially if you're earning, you know, income online, you can then reinvest that in a way that is, you know, you don't have to play around with crypto, or you don't have to, you know, you can build assets in a different way, proper tangible assets. And, you know, obviously the profit threshold is lower because it's, you know, people have less money, but it is more tangible, I think. Yeah. And I know crypto is something you're interested in. Maybe you want to talk about that, maybe not.
Not really.
It's not that interesting, I don't think, but people,
I mean,
people
unless
love
you're
to talk about it.
Yeah, but like I've just come to realize, like, you know, story short, like, yeah, sure, I got interested in crypto last year because, you know, it was going up and everything, but it's, if you're not actually, and I did a few interviews with crypto companies actually while I was at Microsoft. Unless you're actually building something or actually working in crypto, I don't find it as interesting to be occupying all your space. Because if all you're going to do is invest $10,000 in it, hoping that it goes to $1 million, it's not going to happen. And then, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe it happens for one person, but if it doesn't happen for the rest, it doesn't really happen. And it's like, if you're not actually building anything, it's like, okay, sure, I've got some money in crypto, I don't really pay much attention to it. That's it. There's no other reason why I don't want to talk to it. Like, I find some things interesting, but I kind of removed myself from it when I realized I'm not building here. I'm not working in crypto either. I don't want to be the kind of guy who's 10 hours a day staring at charts, reading every little piece of information to find an edge against others. I don't find any meaning from it. So I was like, well, no, you know, it's like, it's nice to put in some money and see it go up. Not as nice when it goes down, but it's like, well, it's just from a business point of view, is like, in the future, I will gain more by building my skills online, making more money, basically every month, and then maybe throwing money every month. You know, there's a big difference between throwing 10,000 once and then just spending years trying to make it grow, than maybe building a job where you can throw 1,000 each month and then do it consistently for 5 years, as similar as a savings account, where you would invest in other assets. So that's what I'm doing. I was like, well, I'm just going to focus my attention where the highest leverage is. This is one thing we teach at Selfmastered, basically, is we teach entrepreneurs that there's maximum 2, maybe even 3 actions that you can do right now that take your business to the next level, that move the needle for it, you know, because there's a billion different things that you can do for your business, but there's a massive difference between spending 2 hours on accounting or outsourcing accounting and spending 2 hours on refining your offer, for example. There's also a big difference between spending 2 hours replying to inconsequential emails. They're always urgent, but they never really matter, versus maybe having somebody else do it, or maybe having a specific time of the day to do it at the end when you're not energetic, and devoting those 2 hours to working on your product, for example. So I just applied the same way of thinking to myself. It's like, what is the, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 things that I could work on right now that would take my, I don't know, life the furthest, that would move the needle the most. And I was like, well, getting good at my job, making more money, and if afterwards I want to put it in crypto, I'll put it in crypto, and that's it. So that's why a few months ago I was like, nah, not interested.
Yeah, sounds sensible. I've always, I'll be honest, it's probably alienated a core people listen to this. I've always thought it's a Ponzi scheme, to be honest. I don't really get it. Like, I kind of get Bitcoin to a lesser degree. Like, I think Bitcoin's a bit different, but like, I still haven't worked out why Bitcoin is going to save the world. I don't know. I don't quite get that. Maybe it's not been explained to me very well, but apparently it's going to save the world. Everyone says it, so it must be true. But the other stuff I do just,
when people
I
invest
just
a lot
believe
of
it's a
money
Ponzi scheme.
I mean, there are a few, to be honest, and generally, like, I don't know if you read this article that's quite famous. I don't know, it's quite popular between our circles. I've loved it for years. It's kind of called like, it's kind of this theory of how, I think it was called like MOPS, sociopaths and stuff like that. I don't know if it rings a bell.
Don't think so.
Well, basically the premise of the article is that cool and interesting and smart people start a movement. Then you have people join in which see the value in it and like kind of become like, so they call it sociopaths, but not in a bad way. It's just because they see the value that others create, so they join, and then you get like everybody else that joins. It's kind of like that. So like crypto, say, I don't know, 10 years ago, none of us heard of it because you had to be like a really big like math nerd, cryptography nerd, and you know, libertarian, and I think they called cypherpunks and everything. So you kind of have to be a really specific kind of profile of person to be into it. But as more people join, you know, the general IQ of it all just goes down. The general intelligence of it all goes down. So now it's all just fucking Ponzi schemes. And yeah, I don't know. It's basically, there was this meme basically saying crypto 10 years ago, and so like, you know, you see the, I don't know, like a Chad or whatever, right? And it's like, I solved the Byzantine problem of, you know, double spending and blah, blah, blah. It's just very like intellectual, and we're gonna, you know, intellectual thing. And then it's like crypto now, it's like, oh, coin has dog, and like the retard meme, you know, it's like, it's just exactly like that, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there are some things that have merit, okay? It's just, in general, the hate towards crypto every day, I understand it more. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think that's a good point to stop. I think my internet is breaking up a little bit, so I think it's probably it's a shame to end it, but I feel like it's definitely going to have some interruptions in the recordings for people. So maybe we can close it out and done it again. So let's as I was speaking about it, so let's close it out. Is there any, so where can people find you, Benjamin?
Okay, so on Twitter it's at BenjaminGJW, and just go and check out Selfmastered, the project I'm working on. It's selfmastered.com, exactly as it sounds, all together. And that's pretty much it. Cool.
And I'll link both of those in the description box below for everyone else. For everyone who's listening, thank you very much for joining me and Benjamin in this chat, which is going to be cut a little bit short. This will probably, I don't know whether I'll edit this out. I don't know. We'll see. You'll see, listeners, while you're watching this. But thank you very much, everyone. Please subscribe if you're not already. Like the podcast as well. That would help me out a lot. And I'll be putting a free gift in the description box below for anyone who wants to improve their relationships with women. Just download that for free, no cost to yourself. And thank you very much, guys. And thank you again, Benjamin, for taking the time to be here. It's been really real pleasure to speak with you for the first time. Yeah, great to join. Thanks for having me. Pleasure. Bye. Bye-bye.